Welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gregory Leperati. I'm Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Baruch, and I am Zooming from Queens. Feel free to put in the chat where you're Zooming from. It's been super interesting to see our alumni joining us from all over the world for all of our various alumni events, people from Asia, South America, Europe. So let us know where you're Zooming from, and just so glad you can be with us this evening. This is going to be a super interesting discussion. And before we begin, I would like to just talk about a few housekeeping issues. I encourage everyone to please mute your microphone so that we can have no ambient noise to distract from the speakers. If you would like to keep your camera on, you can. It is nice to see people's smiling faces in the audience. And we will be sending out a recording of this afterwards, so you will be able to take a look at that after the event is over. That being said, I would now like to introduce Pragya Mathur, the Deputy Chair of the Marketing Department here at Baruch, to give a few welcoming remarks. Pragya?
Thank you so much, Greg. So thank you all for joining us today. And as Greg said, on behalf of the Aronson Department of Marketing and International Business, I'd like to welcome you to today's Digital Marketing in the Age of COVID-19 panel discussion. So this event is also titled Looking to 2021 and Beyond, and it's actually a follow-up event, a follow-up discussion to what we had conducted in April of this year when COVID-19 had first struck. And at that time, we were talking as a marketing and business community, trying to figure out how we would be dealing with this crisis. So it was really useful to learn at that time what business were anticipating. And at the time, we naively thought that we would all get together again in September to see how businesses had dealt with the COVID-19 crisis. Well, here we are 9 months later, and we are still dealing with it. We're still learning, but we're also adapting and responding. So, it gives me a lot of pleasure. And I want to give a big thanks to our distinguished alumni panelists who are so generous with their time and for also sharing their experiences. I, along with all of you, we're looking forward to their discussion today about how businesses will continue to respond and greet 2021, meeting the demands of this changing digital landscape. So I'm going to hand over to Greg, who will introduce our panelists. Thank you again and welcome.
Thank you, Pragya. And I would like to remind everyone to please put any questions for the panelists throughout the event in the chat bar. I will be monitoring it, and then when the panel discussion concludes, we will then get to as many audience questions as we can. I'd now like to introduce our panel. Moderating tonight's discussion is Ben Gutman. He's co-founder and partner of Digital Natives Group, an award-winning Long Island City-based digital marketing agency. He's worked with brands like I Love New York, the NFL, Comcast NBC, the Empire State Building, and more. He also teaches digital marketing as an adjunct lecturer at Baruch. Welcome, Ben. On our panel, we have Gina Aliotto, Vice President of Transformation Experience at Symphony Talent, a company that assists talent acquisition teams. She actually previously served as VP of Marketing, and her new position is somewhat recent. She actually got that since the last time we spoke with Gina at our last panel discussion. So we're interested to hear her insights, hear about how her role has changed. And she has previously worked with brands including USA Network, iHeartMedia, Heineken, Tribeca Film Festival, and more. Welcome, Gina. We also have Gil Gilead, a digital marketing specialist at Siemens Healthineers, where he works on global campaigns, optimizing web content through SEO, A/B testing, you name it. And the healthcare space in particular is particularly relevant and challenging field these last 10 months. So we're really grateful for Gil to join us this evening. Gil also recently became a father for the first time. So congratulations again, Gil. That's awesome news. And Brittany Good, last but certainly not least, is Senior Media Strategist at Giant Spoon, a creative agency based in New York and Los Angeles. Brittany is lucky enough to be based in sunny LA, as I sit here in 37-degree weather in New York. So I'm a little jealous of Brittany, but we're so glad that she could join us here on Zoom. She's worked with an eclectic mix of brands, including Bliss, FC Barcelona, and Herschel Supply Company, and more. We're so glad that she could join us this evening. That being said, I'd like to now hand things over to Ben to begin the conversation. Ben?
Great, thank you, Greg. And thank you, Pragya. And thank you to our panelists, Gina, Gil, Brittany. I'm excited for this conversation. As was mentioned before, this is a semi-sequel to a conversation that we had earlier in the pandemic. And I remember, sitting there as a panelist that time discussing, oh, well, this might not change that much. This might be, a short-term thing. Maybe a few things are going to be accelerated. And I'd like to maybe kick things off by asking all the panelists, as we sit here at the end of 2020, 25 days away, have you had to summarize the state of marketing this year? What would it be in one sentence?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
So in one sentence, I'd say all the trends we knew before, but do it more and do it faster.
I like that. Gil?
Well, just as a summary, I would say it was condensed in one word. And particularly in the health space, it was very condensed, and campaigns had to be made much more faster and much more quick, and all digital. So everything went from we had time to this much time to create content, get it out, and get it done.
For sure. And Brittany?
Yeah, I would say that marketing was turned on its head, and it became a very flexible and adaptable channel for us at Giant Spoon. So very much in flux, if that makes sense.
And then maybe I'll follow this one up with saying, knowing what you just said and knowing what you know now, if you were to hop in your Bernard Baruch time machine and go back to January 1st of this year, what would you do differently? Well, how would you change your strategy, for your company? How would you change your own life and your work life for that? I guess let's go back in backwards order. So Brittany.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a great question. It's so funny. I remember at the beginning of the year, we're talking internally at work, and, people were talking about COVID-19, and we were like, oh, it's just going to be it's not going to be this big thing. And then we get to work from home model, which is supposed to be a few weeks. And as now it's been 9 months. And so I think one thing that, looking back at January 1st, I'd say just to have patience, and knowing the amount of pivots and the amount of changes we need to do in terms of research or pivoting media plans and working with partners to change things and switch out tactics. I think flexibility, patience, and more than anything, positivity would be something that I would tell myself to have and really hone in on as of January 1st, 2020, looking forward. It's been a crazy year, but still a good year. But that's kind of, again, it's been just thinking about some of the things we dealt with in terms of a lot of our clients, like a travel industry, or even just consumer brands or fintech, just a lot of those pivots and a lot of changes that impact that. I'd say March was definitely a crazy time.
Gil?
I would say that when we look back, the approach was we kind of froze in the communications in the beginning. There was, we tried to be, especially in the healthcare industry, very sensitive to what was going on with COVID, and to not portray the company as trying to make a profit from what was happening. One of the things that we saw that was happening during the year, that events were being canceled, the physical events, one by one. And I think that if we had to look back and plan ahead, we could have probably seen that that was what was going to happen, and we would have planned more effectively to do virtual events much faster in the beginning of the year, so that we would develop relationships with the vendors and develop relationships with the right companies, and with companies that would be able to integrate with our systems. Things that I believe that are going to be a part of our future in events in the future. I don't think that we're going to go back to events that are going to be all physical. I think there's going to be some kind of a hybrid approach, and I think that that's going to be something that has changed in the mindset of companies, not just ours, but in a lot of other companies.
I think that's an interesting point. So your first point there, in particular about, trying to be very conscious of, how things were coming across. I know in our work, so I run a digital marketing agency. We do a lot of work in publishing and health and wellness. We work with a lot of, doctors who have these books coming out. We had this internal debate too, where it was saying, I was very cautious. I was saying, I don't want us to look like we're taking advantage of anything, like we're trying to use this to sell anything. I want to be very, very careful about that. Some of my colleagues were maybe a little more bullish about it. And then, we all kind of warmed up to it maybe at different speeds, not using the coronavirus to sell your stuff, not making light of it, but adapting to that reality. That's a good point. And then Gina, I want to hear your piece on this too. Going back to the debt reverse.
Absolutely, what you said, Ben and Gil, and also to Brittany's point, from a brand perspective, not overlooking the emotional aspect of a brand and how important that is, which again is a trend that we knew before, but it became even more important in that time and in the right now. We hear businesses across all industries, like Brittany described, that their goals and plans have been turned on end. And I'm OCD with my plans, so I want to be in denial about this. But the quicker we can come to terms with the reality and those changes, the better. And coming to terms with what we did yesterday isn't going to work today and might not work tomorrow. So the more we can come to terms with that, the better we'll be, in a better position against our competitors. And, I'm equally as competitive as I am OCD with my plans. So now some might hear that and say, oh, okay, so plans are out the window, time of uncertainty, I'll just fly by the seat of my pants. But in fact, that's not sustainable. And just because we're in a time of uncertainty doesn't mean we shouldn't have a plan. So I think, something that I've been repeating to myself that's been helping me through this is that it's not necessarily about the plan, it's about what you learn and what happens in the planning process. And the plan can change, it needs to change and needs to be adaptable, but it's the critical thinking you do when you assess the situation, collect data, test different solutions. And that was a trend before to do those things. But from my perspective, COVID has accelerated that need for speed, accuracy, the ability to research faster, assess faster, make accurate decisions faster. And it's also solidified the requirement for that creativity and critical thinking skills. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain people and that have thrived. There's certain people that have struggled with this, and at varying points of it, right? Because early quarantine, early COVID was a different time than the summer, than the fall. And I think that different personalities, different organizations have had strengths and weaknesses for each one of those. And I guess I'll throw this one up as a jump ball, but are there any brands or organizations that you think did a particularly good job in marketing or communicating this year?
So I've been thinking about this a lot because when we were chatting the other day, I was thinking about when you asked this, and I grew up in a household where we would sit and watch commercials with my father and critique them competitively as a family. So I really want to answer this question, but then I started thinking back to in March, through the summer, ads all seem to blend like one big commercial. Am I the only one who feels that way?
Slow piano music.
Yes. And I couldn't distinguish one brand from another. And I'm not so sure I cared to in the time. When COVID first hit, I don't think any of us wanted to hear anything except for credible information about prevention, self-care, number of cases. And I didn't really see that in ads until I guess a few months ago, which my favorite ad now is actually a New York City public service announcement by NYC that are so well done that I thought I was watching a consumer brand commercial. I'm sure you guys have seen those. It's like, you're doing good, New York, keep washing your hands. And so that might be just my perception. But how about you guys?
It could be to Gina's point, if there's a public official, if there's an organization, it doesn't have to be a selling context, but marketing in the broader sense, right? In terms of communicating things over the course of this year.
I can jump in. Definitely completely feel where you're coming from, Gina. I feel like at one point it was we're here and the somber kind of like you nodded to, and it all did start blending. And I think internally it got to a point where it was like, where are we going to start making the pivots to kind of look forward and figure out a sense of optimism and shifting? Again, we're in this new normal and we have to figure out what are those steps moving forward. I think one ad that I really loved was that Apple working from home ad. I feel like it was a great example of showing so many products, but at the same time tying into what's happening with culture. You have the multiple people in a room trying to brainstorm a product or brainstorm an idea, but the integration of the products was great. And then I'd say another brand that I feel is doing well is Shopify. Small business owners got hit so bad. There was such an uncertainty of how that business would move moving forward. And I think they did a great job of pivoting in terms of moving from experiential to digital to help small business owners. They actually did a show, I Quit with Discovery Network. And so I think they looked at really creative ways to make impact for their audience, but also overarchingly helping their brand also get a kind of good nod of perception during these difficult times.
Brittany, you make such an excellent point, because for brands, especially during those initial first couple of months, the best ads were definitely those that thoughtfully and creatively found ways to connect their audience and the message their audience needed to hear, like the Apple commercial, with their business, and do it in a tasteful way. And I think that was an excellent one. Now that you say it, that was a great one. I can't think of any others during that initial period, but now that we're past that initial shock, even though we're still in the thick of the pandemic, the best ad I've seen recently was for Match.com and Meeting 2020. I think that's a great example.
Such a good ad. Completely agree.
So, that's, and when you mentioned something like Match.com, some of these other platforms began to change their technologies as well too, right? They got rid of the distance requirements. They had video chat added to it. And I think that when you start to think of how has marketing changed, and not just saying what was a great ad, but what was great kind of communication, I think, a small two pieces that are not quite related to each other, but they both stick in my mind. Number one is you looked at all these live shows that were going, all these nightly shows. Most of them, they did the things, oh, we're doing this outdoors, we're doing this around the fire pit. Stephen Colbert did it in his bubble bath. That was like cute and campy for like a little bit. But I think that you look at somebody like John Oliver's show and they just said, we realized we're going to be in this for a while. And they just embraced that aesthetic. That is like a symbol for a lot of brands that said, yeah, you know what, this isn't going to go away in 2 weeks. This isn't like a snow day. This is something where we're going to have to do a larger change. That I think was something. And then as a piece of marketing technology, I think in technology in the broadest sense, floor decals, I think was one of the most interesting things. You see how they put the little markers on the floor for, this is not quite digital marketing, but some of them had QR codes in them. It's for, stand 6 feet apart here and there. Some of them were just kind of, general ones, but I've seen liquor companies at like wine shops and stuff have different ones. The MTA has read really fun, funky ones, and using that to kind of, using every touch point to tell your brand story, to share a message, to add some levity to it, I think is really great. And then, so let me, I guess, also ask the inverse of this question, because I think we're going to have easier answers maybe for this one, which is who screwed the pooch? Who did a terrible job with marketing, with communications? Who made the biggest blunders in this year, especially as, again, we're talking about COVID? I'll ping Gil and see if he has anything.
I can't mention off the top of my head. Actually, I actually thought about the opposite. I was starting to think on the brands that you were saying, and what I've seen in terms of messaging is that you all said that there was this part where everything was very emotional in the beginning, and I think that people now are kind of, they've reached the point where like, okay, we've had enough of that kind of messaging. and we're looking for you to also provide us solutions. So I think the expectation now is for companies to have more of a, yes, we're safe, but we're also providing you with like real solutions and to how to work with the situation as it is. And one of the ads that I actually did see lately was the one from Microsoft for Microsoft Teams, because they had this like together, and it seemed to have worked for me at least, that Zoom was so successful, and Zoom became such a wonderful like brand that really succeeded. But in terms of like how to use technology platforms, we're using that as a platform, but that idea of together kind of resonated without being too emotional, but also providing you with like a solution. Like, you can collaborate using this platform. This is not gonna end now. Use this. It'll work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might be just my perception, so I'd love to hear what you think. But to me now, especially after the summer and especially this month, I feel many brands seem to almost be back to a business as usual. So I just saw an ad recently for H&M that could have almost been from last year, pre-COVID, when the situation clearly is not, which is not just poor advertising, but it's actually dangerous. So I feel like if your brand is not still giving a deliberate message that's going to help the people in the world at large, then don't, I feel like the same rules apply even though it's past the summer. How about you guys?
I definitely agree with that point as well, and also points what you said as well, Go. But it's kind of like the elephant in the room. Like you can't not address it, and especially if if you're running a huge brand campaign, I think there has to be an element of the fact that they're different now, right? And what are your operations moving forward? And so, in terms of something that's bad, I have been doing that strong thinking as well. And from the top of my head, I can't think of a brand that completely plundered it, but I do think these are key points in how brands can continue with messaging moving forward and key elements to include.
In fact, the big brands that blew it would have been the ones that are typically vocal, that chose not to, they chose to retreat and be silent. I think your audience noticed that and will remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, kind of touching upon a couple of the points people said here, one of the ones that does come to mind for me, and it's more of maybe less of a marketing, more of a business decision, but any brand that maybe rushed to reopen or to welcome people back without having people's safety and health as their first and foremost goal, I think in retrospect that's something that is going to look poorly. And that might be, I saw in the chat somebody mentioned American Airlines. I see people can talk about Carnival Cruise Lines, Disney World reopen, all these people that said, well, we really got to get back in this. I think in the long reflection of it might not end up looking that great. I maybe kind of ask a couple kind of individual questions as well here too. Gil, you mentioned what it was like to kind of the tightrope you were walking in the healthcare space at the beginning of this. You've had a front row seat to maybe the most interesting and kind of crazy industry in 2020. Can you give me kind of a behind the scenes look at what was that like?
So as I said in the beginning, we did kind of silent ourselves, and we actually saw. So I'm in the laboratory diagnostics, and I market the laboratory diagnostics tests. And as COVID became very, very clear to be staying, we shifted a lot of the the research into COVID testing. So so our research department started to develop molecular testing for COVID-19 and serology tests and antibody tests, and that was like we obviously, this usually takes months and years to develop, and so every time that there was some kind of a benchmark that they passed, every communication was related to it. It was a PR release that just like pushed that, and through social media, through websites, through search, and we all had to like kind of converge and change everything to like adapt to it. And when something was changed to fall off and be no longer valid, we had to do the same. And this happened in such a quick pace that I told you, Ben, I was when my baby was being born, the day of, I was still like checking vanity URLs on my phone that weren't they had errors on them. Like it was very intense.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's just, I can only imagine what it would be like to be in that environment. And you know, another space that we I don't know how much the space changed in and of itself, but how we related to that space and the quantity in which we related to that space has changed is media. And Brittany, you're a senior media strategist at Giant Spoon. The past 8 or 9 months, seismic shift in how we consume media. From where you sit, how does that look?
Oh my gosh, that's another great question. We actually, we are in the midst of 2021 planning. And so we've been doing so many deep dives into what's happened in 2020 and what this means moving forward. And I think a couple of those pieces are streaming is, again, it's on the rise. You know, you have a insane increase in consumption habits. I think Nielsen said about there's a 74% increase year over year. And, you know, you want to be on the where people are consuming media. So I think one thing is streaming is on the rise. And when you're looking at buying in terms of dollars and efficiencies, it's highly targeted. You can minimize waste if you're buying linear, but then also you can also cap your frequency and get more insights and learnings to apply for future. So I think that's been a really big pivot we've made. Another one that has definitely been rising for us is kind of a hone in on content. And I think you have to be particular with how you're looking at content, right? For example, you know, doing a content partnership, but making sure it is where your audience is, but it has some credible type of vibes there where you're able to hone in on that IP. But I think as well, consumers they're looking for that emotional connection. They're looking for something that's going to get them through, right? Some sense of positivity. And I think thirdly, another one is I think there's going to be a big, well, we've been pivoting towards local planning and news coverage as well. So again, being where the audience is and shifting more to those localized items, whether it is, you know, targeted audio or, you know, honing that up with some display to allow that as well. And then looking at each thing in a full funnel approach of how you're able to cross channel and drive people down from the funnel. So it's been a very interesting approach, but I will say across the board, digital definitely has been a strong point for us. But as we look at 2021, I think we're seeing too that traditional channels might come back. And then, you know, Gil was talking about it earlier, but a big thing at Giant Spoon is experiential. We are a full service agency. And so that department took a huge hit. But we've been able to make great pivots of doing things that are super virtual or doing drive-ins. They did a great HBO activation where they did a drive-in and it was so great, right? You still have the social distancing, but we're able to get that branding. And so again, very long blurb of what I said, but long story short, for now, definitely a focus on those channels where you can get super targeted and make your dollars efficient. And looking ahead, it's definitely staying on top of trends to see how traditional channels will come back as we move into 2021.
Brittany, isn't it also true about how television, and maybe not so much out of home when we're talking about traditional channels, so maybe not so much out of home because everybody's home, but television and radio are great traditional channels for media, but it's also about the combination of and that mix with digital. So long as it's mixed, but to keep that, you know, omni-channel approach is still critical.
Yeah, definitely. And then you're getting that unduplicated reach or that extension there as well. And so that combination of both is so key. So definitely agree with that as well, Gina.
Yeah, and you mentioned the out of home, you mentioned the experientials. You know, experiential is probably one of the biggest growth areas for a lot of brands in the past few years. As people have been fragmented into more and more different, there's no more mainstream media, right? And to see what's happened to that in the past year, I mean, it's been erased more or less. But now there's brands that are beginning to take advantage of the new environment. And then Gina, I want to go to you. So you and I know each other from school. We were in Baruch together. You graduated a couple years before me into the midst of the Great Recession. this time around, we've seen in the past 8 months since we last spoke, record months for unemployment, record months for new employment, and you've also changed your job in that time. Give me a sense as to what it's like, on this roller coaster from where you sit.
Yes, and maybe do like a quick poll, a raise of hands of anybody here who's about to graduate or recently graduated and is currently looking for work, or you could just drop it into the chat just to get a sense for who's on the line. Anybody want to raise your hands in graduating in May, graduated in May, and you guys are looking for work or recently? Oh, graduating in May, I see in the chat. Okay, got it. So you guys are kind of in the same boat. I can certainly empathize with the folks here who are graduating. As Ben mentioned, I graduated right at in the recession. And, in my industry, I'm in the HR tech industry working for Symphony Talent, and we're seeing industries laying off employees, especially in hospitality, restaurants, hotels, travel. Many of my friends in experiential arts and live events have been laid off. So the graduates or soon to be graduates that are listening here, I think you have an advantage because our work can be done virtually, whether that's marketing or finance or accounting or whatever degree you're pursuing. I do see jobs out there for digital marketing, even, chief marketing officers, analysts, finance, accounting. And the way that I looked at it when I was graduating is that a friend of mine who is a professional photographer was teaching me how to use my camera and the lens. And when there's not enough light around you, you need to widen the aperture to capture whatever possible light is around to pass through. And so if you think about it that way and broaden your aperture to capture more light around you, and think about that when you're pursuing your career, broaden what you envision for your career. And it might be different than what you originally sought out to pursue when you started your degree. And that's okay. And the message here is definitely not, make compromises or move away from that, but stay focused on it, but just broaden your aperture so you could allow more light to come in and broaden up your options. So a tangible example of that is one of our customers is Ecolab. Does anybody here know the brand Ecolab? I certainly did not. But if you go into any, hospital or restaurant or hotel in the restrooms, or even hand sanitizer in any stores that you've been through in your grocery store, you're going to see the name Ecolab. It's a chemicals and service. They have water management and food safety and things like that. So Ecolab is hiring for marketing, but who here ever thought about doing marketing for Ecolab? But they're hiring. So if you can kind of, broaden what you see for your career and what you envision, and then deliberately take steps to go towards that path, it is not going to be linear, but nothing really in this world is linear anyway. And I went through a very similar career path, and now I was very intentional about each career move that I made, and it wasn't always my first choice, but where I've landed now is certainly my dream job. So hopefully those are some encouraging words, certainly helped me through my journey.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, and your story is also a good kind of microcosm of some of this too. I guess the dirty little secret in a lot of work, but in marketing in particular, and I told this to my students last night in our last class, which was the raises are going to come from going like this. That's how you're going to make more money, is going from side to side diagonally from one company to another. As an employer, as an agency owner, I don't want to tell you, hey, go leave your job. But to what Gina just said, where you start your career is not where you're going to end your career. in all likelihood. Nobody works 40 years, gets that gold watch, and retires. You can start where you have an opportunity and then use your abilities, your creativity, your network to begin to network into a job that you want. And because if you go like this and you jump the ladder rungs this way, you're going to make more money in the long run by doing it.
You're absolutely right, Ben. And another way to think about it is the world is changing and organizations are changing. So in fact, the role that you're envisioning, maybe let's use marketing as an example, the role that you may have went into your degree and for 4 years ago, in marketing, that role is changing as we speak. So in fact, your perspective and your approach also needs to change, because marketing 4 years ago does not equal marketing. In fact, by the time I graduated, my marketing degree was irrelevant. My education was excellent at Baruch, but marketing has changed so much and it's changing so rapidly. So that is just another way of looking at it,
Oh yeah. And this is a good way maybe to segue into another segment of questions for everybody, which, you talk about, your education being almost irrelevant 5 years down the line in this field. In the past year alone, how has your job changed, both in terms of the day-to-day as well as the overall kind of maybe strategy and the mission for your company or for your team? Who wants to pop in first here?
I can pop in. I completely changed my position this year. I started in a position at Siemens Healthineers doing social media for events, for big conferences, writing the posts and doing the schedule and all that. And then my team completely changed, and I became, my position was to become an expert in marketing analytics. Completely, and so I completely agree with what Gina said and what you said about this zigzag. I was always interested in marketing analytics. Even when I finished Baruch, I was actually looking for an internship in that, but I didn't get it. But I went into more creative fields and succeeded in that and just kept moving in that direction. But that is to say that if you are looking for something and you're interested in it, there is an opportunity if you are continuing to pursue it. Even, and in my case, I could say, because it's a big company, there's a chance there that you'll find that role. Or if you want to transition to someplace else, then, like you said, that zig to a different company, that's going to give you the next opportunity. But if you are in larger companies, that zig can happen within that company. So that's how my role changed. And I already spoke about how what we do completely changed, but yeah.
I'll jump in quick. I think we've had a lot of pivots at our agency. We did get hit a little hard at the onset of COVID, where we had to downsize a bit. And so with that came changes to team structure and also to overall roles and responsibilities. And I think, again, there's always that piece of, the left and the right side of the brain coming together. But I think in the past couple months, there's been a big influence on us, again, kind of as you were saying, Gil, honing, and not an analyst exactly, but diving into analytics and seeing how numbers are working, but also putting on more of that strategy hat and figuring out what is the strategic approach here and what are the implications of these changes to further impact the media plan. And so I think for us, some of the big key things we've had is just really, again, kind of downsizing and having to wear multiple hats that you wouldn't necessarily wear, or manage up or manage down a little bit more. And I think it does make you a little bit well-rounded in the end. But as we are going through now, I think we've onboarded some new clients as well during the year. And so we're looking at restructuring to figure out a way to make sure everyone has the support they need, but also the growth and everything they need at that level to continue in their trajectory at Giant Spoon. So it's been a little bit of a role turned upside down, but I think there's times when it's crazy, but it's good to be busy and it's good work. But it's also something that's going to be good for you because you're constantly learning, and it's just only making you a more well-rounded marketer with these kinds of big changes in unprecedented times.
My role changed completely, but the way that I see how marketing has changed, Brittany and Gil shared at the beginning of the call about adaptability. I think that adaptability is so key for marketers today. And another point is, how marketers' roles have changed. I also see empathy in there as well. But that said, it's those marketers who truly understand what empathy is and how to apply it to their role in marketing is key. So learning more about customers, learning about how to partner with other business units within your organization. Gone are the days of operating in silos. And I think that shifting to a virtual workplace has accelerated that, undoubtedly. So the relationship between marketing, customer, sales, and product, if you have product, or services, if you're a services company, that engine needs to be tighter than ever. So I think the role in marketing has changed. And it was already on a path to change, but COVID certainly accelerated that. Personally, my role changed. And in fact, my role didn't exist. It's a pretty new role in general, and it's brand new for our organization. And I previously served as the VP of marketing. I saw a business need in our organization to look at the customer experience and employee experience holistically, but managed in a combined effort to kind of break down those silos and bring those two concepts together, customer experience and employee experience, to optimize our business impact. And so that's what I'm focusing on now. That's transformation. Our organization goes through tons of changes. We go through many mergers and acquisitions. Plus, I have my environment in mind, and I'm watching what's happening in the market, what's happening in the world. And I saw that there's this need for somebody to help work. I partnered directly with the CEO to drive the organization's transformation, to ensure that we're always not only upholding our competitive edge, but also ensuring that our people are at the core of everything that we do, and our customers are front and center of everything that we do. So that's the transformation role in a nutshell. So it's a lot more than that, of course, but.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so, I guess maybe a similar question, but a little bit more granular, kind of in the weeds here, which is saying, so I'm here in my apartment today. We have an office, we had an office 7 blocks away from here. Our lease was up. We said, you know what, we're going to go fully remote. One of my colleagues moved to California. A couple other folks, they got a little bit kind of further afield, they stayed with family, whatever it was. And we've been operating fully remotely for basically the past 7, 8, 9 months. Do you have, and what is it like to work remote? What are your tips for it? How would you say to somebody who's maybe just entering the workforce, how do you stand out and be a good remote employee?
I can start with that. So I was actually working remote before COVID. I was working remote about 2 to 3 times a week because my commute is, I'm in Brooklyn, and the offices are in Tarrytown. So I developed a schedule that is, I'm an early riser, and that's something that's was pretty essential for me because I kind of do all the take caring of yourself in the beginning of the day, so that I have the space and the peace of mind to do the work. So giving yourself time ahead of time, saying, okay, I need this much time before I actually go to work, that's something that I know that's important for me. So that's a tip that I could give from working remote. Of course, creating your own space, that it's a space to work. And honestly, dressing to work. You come, it's as if you're going to an office. You dress to go to work. You're not staying in your pajamas to work on the desk. We're going to work. So that's another thing that I've always taken with me. Those are my tips for now.
Great, those are good ones. I used to have a rule. So when our office was in a different location and I would work from home sometimes, my rule was, I had 2 rules. Number 1, I had to leave the apartment and come back. So I had to, if I was going for a walk, running an errand, getting breakfast, whatever it is, leave the apartment and come back. And then number two is I had to keep my shoes on when I was working. However, at the office, I would often take my shoes off, right? So it would be an interesting contrast. Brittany or Gina, anything you want to add about the work, WFH life that we all have now?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I personally, I love it. Beforehand, we would have flexible, if you needed to work from home, you could. So when we got the order to work from home, we definitely cleared out the office. We took monitors, we took chairs, like we literally made an office and home. And so definitely so many good points were made. I think definitely making a space, because what can tend to happen is that work and regular life blends into one cycle of Groundhog Day craziness. And so I think you have to make those specific changes to have those moments for yourself, whether it's taking a walk or, having your moment in the morning where you do what you need to do, because it can easily be very much where you're just constantly in the zone of working, and again, there's no way to separate that. You would commute, that's the end of your workday, et cetera. And I think another thing too is when you have your space, maybe just bring some things of joy there. Like I have a little plant. And I think just little things that give a sense of again, just some positivity, because I think it also does get a little bit of a drain sometimes, especially with, again, the way that we are in the field, things are changing. And I know we're doing a lot of things for clients, or if you're managing a brand. And so I think you have to figure out that balance to make sure that you keep your sanity with what's going on with work, but also the sanity of what's going on in the real world, because it's such a crazy year, and kind of keeping that kind of self-care. I know it's like overused, but self-care is very important. So yeah.
Yes, self-care is not selfish. And you all bring up great points, especially about doing something to bring you joy, or having something that brings you joy in your room. I also try to get sunlight, because working from home at your computer is actually, I have a tougher time falling asleep or staying asleep at night. And that's really critically important, crucially important. Working remotely requires discipline. I've been doing it for most of my career, and it definitely took some time to get adjusted. I find that there's two types of people. There's those that are worried they're going to watch Netflix or play video games during the day and have poor work-life balance in that direction. And there's others like myself, and probably Brittany, which is Brittany described, and I know the other folks on the call too, who are like working all the time and don't know when to shut it off. It is definitely not a one size fits all, and you have to do what works for you and will make you most productive. My favorite quote is from Dolly Parton, where she talks about waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's her most productive hours. From 3 o'clock to 8 a.m. is when she gets all of her work done, and then she enjoys the rest of her day. That's not realistic for all jobs, of course, but when you're looking for work, find work that allows flexible work hours. And I think you'll find that you could be very productive when you work remotely. And learn to love Zoom. I hated being on camera. I never wanted to turn my camera on. And now I've just learned to, well, first I learned how to turn off where I can't see myself, and then learn to love Zoom and just get used to it, because it could be close to an in-person conversation, or as close as possible. It's certainly better than a phone call when you can see body language and facial expressions. And for those that are worried about working remotely, I just say, don't be scared of it. Think about all of the skills that you have in person and those physical skills, and figure out how to translate that to digital. And the better you can do that, the more successful you will have. The more successful you'll be working remotely, and the better you'll feel about working remotely. And those like in-person tangible skills, translate those to digital, even if it's a warm email or warm chat, or coffee, water cooler chats or coffee chats with your coworkers. Do that digitally too. So
yeah, and to what you said about and not the most recent point before about Zoom, what I've found helpful is realize that this is what it's going to be. Like this is the office now. You're going to go to you're going to sit down at your computer. You're going to be on Slack. You're going to be on Zoom. We're going to be on whatever other alternatives to those are, and treat that with the same level of like professionalism that you would if you're going to the office. And so, again, I know it's a hard thing to ask somebody who maybe just graduated or lost their job to say, hey, go spend a few bucks on something. But if your microphone doesn't work, go buy a new microphone. If your camera doesn't work, go buy a new camera. You can get these things on Amazon. It was really hard to get these things early, in pandemic, but now you can go on Amazon for 20 bucks and get both of these things. The other thing, you make sure you're, if you need headphones, get headphones. If you need light, get light. I have a light here, and I don't know if I turn it on and off, but so that you look that you look presentable and sound presentable and communicate effectively on these platforms, the same way that you would shave and put on deodorant or whatever if you go into the office. Do that if you're going to Zoom.
Ben, that's such a great point. Your lighting is so much better than the three of ours, because my face is dim. As the sun went down, my face just got dimmer and dimmer. Light is so important.
Oh yeah, and then so there's a window over here, and during the day I'm like a ghost. Though I have to close this because I'm incredibly pale. And then I forgot if it was Gil or Brittany or both of you that also said about like the workspace. I've also found that to be very helpful too. Is like, it just so happened I took all this stuff from my office and we closed that down, so I was able to have kind of the same setup I had before. But if you have the luxury to have dedicated space to work in, it's going to be a lot easier for you to be able to turn on and to turn off when you need to. But if you don't, even if it's a simple like a symbol that you're changing your kitchen table into your office, like put a photo up or put your pens out or something like that, that makes it more than just like I'm on my laptop now, then I'm putting it away. Like turn whatever temporary space into a workspace. And I think that will help your productivity.
And another tip I would say is if you want to use a monitor, you should use a monitor. Don't rely on a laptop. Like I'm using 2 screens. The difference is phenomenal. Like the fact that you can see something nice and large versus working on a laptop is, especially if you're doing it 8 hours and more of a day, you can't even compare.
Oh yeah, I've always endorsed a second monitor. And once you have a second monitor, you're never going to be able to go back to using another one. There's a big one right over here. But yeah, that, and then another piece of the puzzle when you talk about a second monitor versus laptop, a laptop is not an ergonomic device. It's great for short bursts, you're on the train or whatever it is, but I know a lot of people realized this pretty soon afterwards, that they were kind of hunching over for their computer, and they put it up on textbooks, they put it up on Amazon boxes, whatever it is. That's one way to do it. There's other things where you can get external keyboards, everything else, but if you're going to be in this for the long haul, make sure that you're taking care of your body as part of that as well.
Just to jump in quickly, the piece about taking care of your body is so important. When I first came home, I set up my area at my high top table, and that was not well for my back. And so I finally bit the bullet and actually I got a desk and got an actual chair to make it an actual workspace to, again, have that stature you need. And I think as well, again, but regardless, whatever space you have, you make that your own. But if you are able to make those adjustments to take care of your body, because again, you're sitting and you're in a stationary position for longer than usual, because you're so much in the zone of working, it's really important to have that care as well, because back problems aren't fun.
Oh yeah. And by the way, for all of these things, for the ergonomic stuff, for the cameras, for the lighting, whatever it is, your company should be paying for most of these things, right? So that's something you should talk to your managers, talk to HR, talk to your the owners, whatever it is, and see what it is that they can support you to do your best work with as part of that. And I'll see about 10 minutes left in this piece here. Okay, I want to ask, I'm going to do this one pretty quickly, and then I want to get to the next one too, which is talk about teams, talk about managers. And for those of you that maybe manage a team or have managed a team in the past, what have you seen in terms of their productivity over the past year, and how can you, as somebody who is responsible for them, how have you done a good job helping them, and what would you recommend to other people that might be in a similar situation?
You want to go ahead?
Okay, sure, I'll kick it off.
Go ahead.
We when we transitioned to the work from home model, I think as a company there were definitely resources about how to be more effective with your direct reports or managing up as well. And so across the board, one thing that we instituted were daily huddles, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, check in on those who are under you, but also be able to manage up. And then as the work kind of became standardized, it either again remained on that level or did become a little bit less. But I think another key piece is just communication, whether it's through Slack or through GChat, whatever is that means of comms for you. Again, you're not sitting next to the person you want to talk to. It's all digital. So it's very important to be able to have those check-ins and be able to talk to your teammates about what's going on if you need help with something. And I know Gina talked about it earlier. I was very hesitant as well in the beginning to always, have my camera off, or I didn't want to be on Zoom or Google Hangouts, but it's now become a thing now where that is a source. Hey, like we need to talk to something quick. Let's get on a quick call and chat through that. So having those lines of communication open, but also making sure that you're having like, hey guys, these are the priorities. How are you doing? What can I take off of your plate? Or let's make sure that we're leveling up needs to kind of be put down at the bottom of our priority list throughout the day. When you're making a transition to a digital world is super important to keep productivity going. And I think the last piece is, again, I think one thing that there's a big understanding that burnout or exhaustion is real. And so we've also kind of, we're very more bi-coastal now because we've never worked more closely with our New York office and LA office before. And so it's very much a, hey, like, let's have an institution of hours that you can schedule meetings that work bi-coastally to make sure that people can turn off and can do what they need to do and have that flexibility. So, yeah.
I fully support what you said, and we're a global company, so it's even worse. We have meetings at 3 a.m. sometimes with India or wherever. So we've learned a lot of things from working remotely as a team. First of all, everything for us we're using in Microsoft Teams. So we don't text, we do use email for, so the what you said about prioritization, it comes through in the communication itself. So if something is important to say, we're using the chat on Teams to tell each other that this is important. I'm chatting you to tell you. But if it's something more long term, we'll send an email, and you can look at it at your leisure. So that's one thing. I have a meeting every week with my manager, a one-on-one meeting, and he does this with all of the members of our team. And we just go over issues. Like I have a list, I have a Word doc of my assignments, and I highlight the ones that I think he needs to address with me, and that's what I go over with him in an hour. And sometimes we brainstorm things that I'm like, wow, I can't believe it. The solution came in this way. So I see no issue working remotely and finding solutions. And we also sometimes use the drawing, that's a little bit wonky. I think that still needs a little bit work, but we do diagrams using Microsoft Teams and try to do a brainstorm that way sometimes. Yeah, that's what I can say about Teams, and it's very important to have boundaries for people, so you know that you should be aware that if you're giving somebody a message at 8 in the evening, you should be aware that this has to be really important for them to do, or you need to know how to set the boundaries, because that's the big issue with working remote. It seems like there's no boundaries, but there are, and you need to know that there's another person on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. And Gina, anything?
True. Boundaries and establishing what preferred means of communication work for you and your teams in what setting. So for example, a customer might prefer an email, but the rules are don't email the customer on the weekend. So figuring out what those things are for your teams that work best within your team and for your customers will help you have the most effective communication. Because with COVID, communication has inevitably gone up as we expect it to, right? We have to communicate with each other. This is how we communicate, through Zoom and through Slack and what have you. So communication has and should go up. It's how we most effectively communicate and most effectively use our time, and how do we optimize our time. So certainly all teams are feeling stretched because everybody's communicating all the time. So the question is, what is the effective communication, effective use of our time? We also notice that employees want to be on every meeting because they're so worried that an important piece of information is going to get shared. So everybody's on all the meetings and there's lots of meetings, and that's not the most effective use of our time. So we have to also build and instill this trust that information will be communicated beyond the team. So you don't have to be on every call, but you will get the information that you need. And I think that now that we've been operating, our organization was 70% remote before this. Now we've moved fully remote. So it's been a big shift for people, especially those that have been with us for 15, 20 plus years. They've received the biggest shock in a shift to a virtual workplace. So I think that how we communicate and the means of communication is key. Like Brittany said, that clarity on goals and priorities, I think we all need help with prioritization. As great of a prioritizer or planner as you are, everybody needs that, because now you might be homeschooling your kids or, managing virtual schooling, for example. And also
Feeding your baby.
Or feeding your baby, exactly. So to that end, also being flexible and empathetic with your teammates. It's really easy to kind of like roll your eyes, or especially if you don't have kids, and roll your eyes like, oh, their kid's in the shot again, or, in the video again. So being flexible and empathetic to that, but then at the same time, also holding your team accountable. So as a manager, we still have to hold our teams accountable. So being crystal clear on what the expectations are will help set the team up for success. And especially like Brittany said, so we all are feeling burnt out. I think everyone is just feeling burnt out, especially now that it's the end of the year, but this is going to go into next year. So finding ways to cultivate resilience and proactively, so not reactively, but proactively finding ways to cultivate resilience within your team and enforcing fresh air breaks or lunch hours, or, take an hour to carve time for creativity and innovation in your work week. Or even, things that you can do where you can shut off Zoom and maybe have a team building exercise some other virtual way. Those are just some ideas on tactics.
Yeah. So I know we got a couple more minutes here, and I want to squeeze in kind of two more questions. They're going to be like rapid answers here. So Zoom has come up a lot, right? It's an understatement to say that the way we use technology has changed in the past year. There are some of the clear winners, the Zooms, the Pelotons. There's also interesting changes in terms of how we use time and money, TikTok, Nintendo, Cameo, Robinhood. There, was even a moment where we all used House Party, if everybody remembers that, kind of in the early pandemic. So I want from each of you, if you can you give me what is one winner and one loser in terms of technology, not marketing, but how we use technology today. Let's start with Brittany.
Sorry. Typical, yes, I'm on mute. My bad, y'all. I think a winner in this space of, again, tech and seeing what's going on, I feel like Twitch has been a winner. I think beforehand, we were seeing a big, rise in, esports, or just even again, streaming or whatever that be. I think Twitch is definitely a winner where you've seen people, again, just stream so many things now, or it can be a source of people playing games or connecting with others. So I think that's been a big brand to come through and shine. I'm also going to say Disney Plus, because I feel like in terms of them launching and the state of the world, the insane launch that they have, and now they're literally second in comparison to Netflix. Talk about like perfect timing in terms of product launch. And then I think for someone who might not have pivoted as well, I'm actually going to say ClassPass. I think Peloton definitely killed it in terms of making that shift automatically and making those pivots for fitness. I think ClassPass might have, if they would have maybe tried to make those pivots a little quicker, it would have been a bigger impact. But I do feel now that, you know, we're not hearing about them as much in comparison to some other fitness apps that came through right from the front. So
Cool.
yeah, those are three, but yeah, real quick.
Good answers. Okay, Gil.
I'm going to think about it more of the business perspective of what technologies like really stood out for me this year. So one of them in the social media space, LinkedIn, and specifically LinkedIn lead gen. I think LinkedIn has always been a good platform for business communications and all of that, but we've managed to like use it because when you send something interesting, you can ask for people's information to subscribe to you, and their information is already automatically in it, so they don't have to do a lot of work. So I think LinkedIn has really shown itself as a really great lead gen kind of platform for us in this space. I already mentioned Microsoft Teams. I think the other thing I want to say about Microsoft Teams is they've changed the interface. As I saw, like from March until now, they added the feature where you can change the background, and then that you could see all the pictures of the people together. Like they developed as it happened. So I would give them a few points for developing, and as I said, they still have to change a few things. But yeah, those are the two that I like to mention.
A different spin on the question. So how brands have adopted technology or how brands are using technology. I give great credit to the companies like Domino's and Pizza Hut who are doing safe delivery and pickups. They pivoted really quickly. I was impressed because they're not traditionally tech companies, and they were able to adopt technology very quickly, or at least that was my perception. Walmart, I think, was another one that they had already been up and coming, you know, adopting tech. But I love the way Walmart is using technology.
Now I was on mute. There we go. I think that these are all great answers. The one loser I guess I'll throw out there is Quibi, right? So Quibi, I mean, this has become a punchline a little bit, but it was a bite-sized video platform made for commutes, and then all of a sudden we had no commutes. So yeah, rough go. Okay, and then so I want to end with this one. For each of you, what is your big prediction for 2021? And we'll start back with Gina and we'll go the other way.
So I almost did it too with being on mute. So my aspiration and hope is that empathy and being human is here to stay. I don't think that our generation will be able to unsee that, unsee the kindness, empathy, and people being human or talking about being human. Even if brands go back to business as usual, I do hope and believe that people will hold them accountable or hostage. Now, do businesses truly understand what empathy and being human means? Being human means something different to everybody. So that's up for debate. But those that truly get it and who are creative enough to best connect their business in a meaningful way to their audiences, and who are courageous enough to take the more challenging path, because it is the more challenging path, and not just the path that checks the boxes or goes through the marketing, you know, best practices and top 10. This is the more challenging path. Those are the people and the brands that will succeed in 2021 and beyond. And, you know, it's really easy to go back to what we're comfortable doing. That's human behavior, right? We go back to what we're comfortable doing. I call it the elastic. You change and you stretch, but then you just go back to what you're comfortable doing. That includes bad habits. And I'm talking about marketing too, marketers' bad habits. So as marketers and graduating, the graduating class and people that are going into business and finance and accounting, this applies too. Whatever your chosen professional path is. But as marketers and consumers, you will be wise to keep your muscles active, your empathy and human muscles active, build up your muscle memory on what we're experiencing this year and beyond, and then apply that to your career and your professional career.
Cool, thank you. Gil.
I think two things. One is that I think that some form of remote work is here to stay. I think that technology was already here since like basically 2005, but this kind of pushed it to that direction. And for those who are graduating now, you could look for a job. If you're in New York, you could still look for a job maybe in Massachusetts, and they might be fine with you working remotely, and because you're the best candidate, and they know how to. They've now jumped to the point where they're able to do that. So it opens up that field, and I think that has options for people who are graduating now to work remotely. The second thing is what I had mentioned in the beginning of the talk, which was about virtual events. So it's of course important to see things and to be physically with people, and I think that's going to be part of there are always going to be conferences, and that's going to return. But I also think that there's going to be some kind of a hybrid approach where during the event there's going to be like a hub. It's a virtual hub that's going to be very state of the art, so that people from other places, not only just in the country, but globally, would be able to go and see what that information is, because they can't go there. They're not going to be able to, they can't take the flight, or they're not going to be able to be there. And I'm very convinced that that's going to be part of the models for a lot of companies.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, and Brittany.
To start, I think there's definitely going to be a big, not that there hasn't been before, but a big focus on connecting data insights to, again, consumer behavior. Again, that's always been key, but I think with this changing landscape and behavior, when you're looking at planning dollars or looking at a brand strategy, whatever, those key insights will be very important. But I think you also have to look at it at the lens of culture. And then secondly, on more of a digital big prediction, I don't know if you guys know, but we are looking forward to a cookieless future. And so I think we're going to see a really big impact on machine learning, but also a reliance on first party data to see how we can actively reach our core audiences. So Nielsen has released what they're thinking of their approach to be, but I think there will be that race to see who's able to come up and launch that approach that works and test it. So very curious to see how that ends up. Absolutely agree with that too.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's also exciting to hear about something that's not just COVID related too, in terms of the cookies. Well, listen, guys, this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you to Gina, to Gil, Brittany, for all of the wonderful answers here. Greg, I'm going to throw it back to you with some of the audience questions.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, what a wonderful, wide-ranging conversation. I really enjoyed that. Thank you also to our alumni who gave so many great questions. I would expect nothing less from Baruch alumni. So I'm going to direct some questions at the panelists, and feel free, any other panelist wants to jump in to provide your own insight as well. For the first question, I'm going to direct it to Brittany. Has the pandemic impacted how brands are targeting audiences and how much they spend on digital advertising? And how do they gauge which ads are successful during such an unusual year?
Really great question. To start, I think, yes, that long story in a bow, yes. When it comes to your audience targeting, I think more than anything, you do want to make sure that you are reaching like your core, primary, secondary, whatever that is identified from your brief or whatever you're working on. But I think more than anything, when you're planning media, you're looking at MRI or GWI to get those insights. And, full transparency, we didn't have updated consumer insights. So it was very much a reliance on going out and seeing what's glorified Googling and getting those trends and behaviors, but then also kind of using a sense of, okay, what's really happening in the world and what makes sense. And so, for example, a few plans, we literally made so much pivots, like Gina mentioned earlier, we completely nixed out of home, right? out of home went into digital, broadcast dollars as well. When we are trying to be a little bit more efficient with dollars, if we're trying to do a mass reaching campaign or something that's more targeted towards conversions, I think it definitely has leaned more towards that, or looking at social channels, right? Everyone is trying to stay connected on so many different levels and being where they're present. So long story short, audience definitely does matter. And I think one big thing that we're finding is you want to minimize your waste, right? You don't want to, again, have those dollars go wasted or those impressions wasted. So anything that's targeted, and that's specifically where their consuming behavior is going to work best and get those better results. And then in terms of what's working best, we're around the approach of testing, A/B testing, or getting multiple versions of creative. And again, tapping into that analytics piece, I feel like we've definitely tied into that more. Like, all right, this is a new time. We have these two options of creative. Let's throw it out there, see what's working. Could it be the color? Could it be the message or the actual imagery presented? What can we do to make sure we're having those learnings for the future as we continue to kind of brief our own internal team? So lots of analytics and lots of research as well to make sure you're doing the right approach.
Thank you, Brittany. I have a question here that I'm going to direct actually to Ben, because I know you've worked with the NFL as one of your clients. This question is, how do you think Major League Sports have handled their marketing throughout this pandemic? And is there anything they've done well or anything they could have done better?
That's interesting. I think that, maybe bringing it up from marketing to more just like the holistic thoughts about it. The pandemic began to feel very real when the NBA suspended their season, right? That's when a lot of people look at it. They look at that day. It was the same day that Trump did a speech. That was like the beginning of it for a lot of people, and shows how much sports impacts, our culture and our how we perceive what's going on in the world. And then I think actually the NBA did the best job of anybody in terms of how they came back, how they treated it, how they managed their teams and their players and their coaches in the bubble. And it was a lesson that was very learnable. And I think that you look at like the MLB and the NFL, and they just chose not to learn it. The MLB, for instance, they could have done the same thing. They could have had they could have had everybody's attention on them. They could have been this very welcome relief of new entertainment come the summer, and they kept on squandering every opportunity. And because of that, they're a league that needs more marketing, that needs more kind of juice to it. And they kind of just dropped the ball physically, metaphorically and literally. And then the NFL, they just basically said, whatever, we're doing whatever we want. And then recently we saw some teams that started without quarterbacks, that like whole games are rescheduled. So I think things are going to come back. I think people are going to want to watch things again. People are going to go to stadiums. I think that's probably towards the top of the list for a lot of people, is like, what am I going to do when we're out of this? Is go to a ball game, go to a concert, go to a movie theater. And I think that there's something to be said about about what have they done without fans this year, and seeing how they've done that. I think what's also been interesting is to see how they've like used assets they've had, like the video game sounds, to simulate the crowds and to do stuff. It's been weird. It's been interesting to watch. And I don't know if I would have any real learnings for next year besides just look at the NBA and look what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question I'm going to direct to Gil, since you have an MBA from Baruch, so that you can speak to this for sure. How important is grad school for a successful career in digital marketing? Is it something you'd recommend right now during this period with people able to do a lot of online learning?
I would say that for me, the graduate degree was the step for me to get into marketing. My first degree was in theater and acting, and doing a graduate degree was a step for me to basically transition. Yes, you can learn a lot of things online. I think that specifically Baruch and the marketing learning that I got taught me concepts of how to think, especially the analytics part. There were a lot of analytics marketing courses that conceptually were very challenging and really taught me how to think and how to question things. And I think that's that's probably the reason why they transitioned me to this role, is because I know how to ask questions, and that's one of the best things that I learned in this graduate degree. And the other part is that there's a great career center. The Baruch Career Center was like a second degree. I took it as if it was another class, and I would spend I think 2 to 3 hours a week somewhere in the career center, just learning from them, going to do interviews, and just becoming better at presenting myself. And I got my internship from them. I got this job through the career center. So I have very great words for the MBA degree and for the career center.
Excellent, thank you, Gil. I have a question for Gina. In regards to when you're looking for a digital marketing role in this pandemic period, what are companies looking for digital marketing roles, entry-level ones? And is there anything that candidates should try to accentuate about their resumes right now, specifically for this current period that we're living in?
I'd say for digital marketing, but any role, this can apply for any role that you're searching for. Adaptability certainly is a quality that every employer is probably looking for right now. Critical thinking skills, problem solvers, and problem solving skills and creativity. I think that you must, in digital marketing specifically, you must be not only up on the trends, but looking ahead of the trends. So kind of that last question that Ben asked all of us about what are your predictions for 2021, that is the level that digital marketers need to be thinking about, and not, reading the top 10, digital marketing best practices, put that in the trash. If even pulling from what Gil just shared about the theater degree, or like looking to other areas for inspiration and thinking outside the box, that's what needs to be applied to digital marketing.
Interesting. Thank you, Gina. This is a question I'm going to direct to Brittany. The question is, with so many brands pumping out content right now, what can a brand do in this moment to truly set themselves apart from the competition?
Another great question. I think when you're looking at branded content, I think there's so many opportunities where, you can go to the standard, you go on Comscore, you pull something and you see what's popping. I think it's kind of taking a different lens and looking at things. So for example, if you're looking at a food brand, right? Like, maybe we can do something with James Beard, or do something that actually is going to give back to our audience. And so I think when it comes to content marketing, of course, there's a core piece of brand storytelling and connecting with your audience on a deeper level, but it's how can we take it a little bit further and give back to our audience, or how can we create programs that they can be integrated with and create some type of community. For example, actually Squarespace just released this amazing, beautiful editorial content that has like this amazing hub that has a highlight of like the top entrepreneurs of 2020. And you dive in, you get their like a bio of them, and it's just this beautiful integration. And I think that's the type of content where you're seeing where, again, it's something that's realistic, something that you can feel. Again, empathy, making sure that you're able to connect on that emotional level. And so I think it's more than just like slapping your logo on something and sponsoring it. It's how can we actually create some content that resonates, and then you're using the IP and the niche of that partner you're working with. So yeah, I think that's how you can definitely stand out instead of just doing some standard custom content program.
Yeah, excellent. Next question, I'm gonna go to Gil for this one. Let's see here. Let's see. Well, this is actually, it ties into what you were talking about earlier, Gil, talking about your earlier degree was not in marketing. How do you distinguish yourself if your degree wasn't in marketing? And secondly, in regards to marketing analytics, what type of skills in particular should you accentuate about marketing analytics if that's what you want to get into as that aspect of digital marketing?
Okay. I'm going to address the second question because I need to think about the first.
Okay.
So about marketing analytics, the there are two things about marketing analytics. One is, yes, you have to be a person who knows how to look at large pieces of data and to piece them out and look at what's important. But I think the skill that I'm really learning now and trying to and continuing to start to learn is really storytelling. Storytelling with data is a completely different skill than just marketing analytics. It's how to present data in a way that tells a story, whether it's this is a success or this is a failure, or how do we move from here. And knowing actually what not to include is one of the biggest parts of that. And I think that if there's one thing that you really want to focus on is the narrative part. So if you are analytical and you do know how to look at numbers, that's great. But what will set you apart is knowing how to tell the story, because you're going to have to be telling the story to an executive. You're going to have to be telling the story to a team of technicians. You're going to have to be telling the story to to a consumer. And these are completely different groups which want to know completely different things. So how to tell the story is really the key, and that's what's marketing. That's the creative part. So that's and so you asked, the first question was, how does a person who doesn't have a marketing degree get into it? So when I would do internships that were unpaid. That's basically that was the first step. And if you're studying, then you just do unpaid internships. Like that's the, and you know what? It doesn't matter. It a little bit matters who you're doing it with, but even if you find a firm that it's not the top of the line firm, you're going to learn from somebody there that's going to teach you, or some skill that you're going to just like learn another skill and another skill and another skill just from doing those internships. So that's how you get into it step by step.
Can I add on here too, which is that what Gil's saying is exactly right, and you can take that a step further, which say what we do in marketing, this isn't medicine, this isn't law, this isn't even being a barber where you have to get a certification. You can just do this, right? You don't. I mean, listen, I graduated from Baruch with a marketing degree. I teach at Baruch in the marketing department. It's wonderful, and it definitely is a big help. But you can walk off the street and start marketing something. You can start selling something. You can vend your own product. You can help somebody, your buddy or whatever. That's the most important thing. And when we're hiring people, it's like, I don't always care necessarily what degree they had or if they even had a degree, but can they do the job? Can they do what we need them to do? And the best way, if you have a theater degree, if you have a biology degree, whatever it is, go and show that you can do it. Go take a widget and advertise it on Facebook, and then make a little case study and be like, hey, go hire me because I did this type of thing.
And apply your marketing expertise or what you learned in marketing to your job search, and have your omni-channel approach to your job search too.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're the first product.
Right. We're all marketing ourselves. Yeah. This has been excellent. I want to end with a question for every panelist. It is the holiday season after all. So what's on your wish list this year? Are there any products or books that you would recommend to our audience? Could be about marketing, work, or anything else. Well, how about we start with Ben?
Yeah. So, we talked about working from home and about having routines and everything. I'll endorse the idea of splurging on a really nice version of something that you use every day. And so I don't drink coffee, I drink tea. And there's across the bridge in Greenpoint here, there's a little tea shop called Baruch. And they sell like really fancy teas in like little tins, and you can make it every day. And so I spent a inordinate amount of money on some really nice tea, and it makes me happy in the morning when I wake up and I can have a fancy cup of tea because I'm a fancy person. So that's something I would definitely recommend. And then another, just not really marketing related book. This happens to be on my desk right now, but if anybody is a designer or listens to podcasts, like 99% Invisible. 99% Invisible has a new book called The 99% Visible City, which is super cool. It's about the built environment of the world around us.
Very nice. Thank you, Ben. Brittany, how about yourself?
I think for me, we were closed between Christmas and New Year's when we shut down. Rest is number one. I'm really excited just to like completely be disconnected. I also, like you, Ben, I love tea. I don't drink coffee, so I'm coming home for the holidays. I'm really maybe can make a stop or get something from there. But I think for me, I have been splurging on like self-care, so like getting masks or just getting random things, like just to really have some moments. So I think for me, it's very much relaxation and splurging. I'm probably gonna get myself. I'm at loss of the name of the brand, but it's like this really amazing nail set, just to kind of do something for me that will be a nice. Brittany, you did it. You made it through 2020. Paint your nails, girl. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Excellent. Gil.
It's funny, you asked what was on my wish list, and the thing that came into my mind is that I want my baby to start eating salads that aren't just cereal. That's like my wish list. But I have a recommendation. So I'm really into podcasts, but I'm also into reading books. So as I said, Storytelling with Data. There's a book called Storytelling with Data. It's by Cole Nussbaumer and Knaflick. I've read it. It's really great. It really shows you how to take visual graphs and how to deconstruct them and change them based on the audiences, and it's very approachable. The person who wrote it is in Google, and he's got a very good set of brains. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Gil. Gina?
Definitely in the same vein as self-care. I've been into essential oils. I never have before, and this year they are my best friend. I'm totally into the eucalyptus and the lavender, so I highly recommend some essential oils.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina. What wonderful recommendations, and what a wonderful conversation. Very wide-ranging, and I enjoyed in the thick of it discussion about digital marketing. Also love the work from home tips and other types of practical advice. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to Ben for moderating this discussion. You did a wonderful job. And thank you to Pragya from the marketing department. Really appreciate your support as always and for being here. Is there any parting words you'd like to share, Pragya, with the group?
All I can say is I had my camera off, but I've actually been sitting here mesmerized the whole time. I did not abuse my camera off privileges at all, even though I had some plans to stretch. And so thank you all so much. It was really very interesting. And I think more importantly for our Baruch community, you know, there were so many personal touches to what you've talked about, which is, you know, it really makes me feel like we are with our extended Baruch family, giving tips to each other on, you know, how to survive this and how your businesses have been dealing with all these changes. So I think, you know, if these businesses are resting a lot of the decision making on the shoulders like yourselves, 2021 better watch out. But again, a big thank you from all of us in the department. And thank you all for being here. It's 7:33. So keeping in spirit with what Gina and everyone said, you know, relax, rest, take time away from your computer. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, Greg and Janet, who I know is here but is not visible, thank you both again for, you know, just what you do and keep our community thriving. We owe a lot of gratitude to you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ben, for moderating also. Bye-bye.
Hi, Janet. There she is. Welcome. Thank you so much to our audience for being here as well, and for all of your great questions and conversation in the chat. We will send out a recording of this afterwards following the event, and hope to see you at some more alumni events in the near future. We have a financial literacy event next week, which I'll share a link to that in our follow-up email as well, about estate planning, which is an important topic. And we hope to see you at another event very soon. Wishing you wonderful holidays and a happy new year. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
Holidays.
Thank you, and be safe.